Okay. And Connie, I think you let in some other folks, didn't you?
I did.
Very
I
good.
think
All right.
they're I think they're
There's
here. Yeah.
and okay, and there's no one waiting. Everybody here. Hello, everybody.
Good
Um,
afternoon.
I
Hello.
think I think we have good. I will be admitting people as they join later, but I think we should get started. My name's Hugh Bleemer. I am an outreach officer with the Chester County Community Foundation. Today, we're going to hear a presentation delivered by Connie Carter and Corinne Sylvia on evaluating or assessing CEOs and boards. So I am going to share a screen and get the presentation up. If anybody has any questions as we're going through the presentation, please just put it in the chat or raise your hand. But one way or another, we will get all of your questions answered. So I am going to turn it over. Let me share a screen. Who do I turn it over to first, Connie or Kareem? Connie.
Me.
All right,
Yes.
Connie. Let me just get it up for you here. There we go.
Okay.
Can everybody see? Everybody okay? All right, very good. And
Okay.
I'll turn the pages for you, Connie.
Bless
Okay,
you.
great. Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this workshop. My name's Connie Carter, and my colleague Corinne Sylvia is here today as well. Together, we work as a team in Sylvia and Carter and Associates. We do consulting with a variety of nonprofit organizations throughout Chester County, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and other areas as well. We do work such as strategic planning, fundraising assessments, board workshops, board trainings, capital campaigns, feasibility studies, the whole gamut of the issues that nonprofits need to learn about and do. So today, and we also do a lot of training programs for the Chester County Community Foundation. So Hugh, can you go to the next slide? Are you in there, Hugh? Yeah, there you go. Okay. So today, we're going to talk about two very important duties of a nonprofit board: evaluation of the chief executive officer or executive director, and board self-evaluation. And as you can see from this slide, they're two of the 7 major roles and responsibilities of any nonprofit board. And yet, they are often neglected or done as an afterthought or not even done at all. We often think that evaluation is an uncomfortable, painful process, and if possible, it should be avoided at all costs. And while it's true that we all have probably experienced unskillful, hurtful, and even painful evaluation situations in our personal or professional lives, evaluation does have the potential to be a highly effective way to make sure that the governance and the management of our nonprofit is being done well. So it does have potential. So I'd like, if any of you are, have had bad situations, let us just give you a little hope here that hopefully by the end of this workshop, you'll maybe be able to see it in a slightly different light. Hugh, next slide. So, because Corinne and I really believe and know from our own experiences, the evaluation process of the CEO and the board can be really strong, helpful learning experiences. So we're going to start with talking about the CEO evaluation. Too often, boards put more effort into the CEO hiring process than they do for evaluation and assessment activities. High-quality board and CEO relationships need to be built on trust, respect, and active communication, and an understanding of the respective roles of each. And this enables an organization to avoid that micromanaging that sometimes boards do, or where the boundaries get blurred between those various responsibilities. So high-performing nonprofits have a very clear understanding of those roles and responsibilities. And to ensure this optimal relationship between the board and the CEO, boards do have a duty to spend equal efforts on 4 different areas of CEO performance: hiring or selection, guidance, giving direction to the CEO, support, meaning supporting the CEO and assisting whenever they can, and evaluation. And each of these activities builds on the other. And if done well, it will lead to high quality relationships and higher, more effective organizational performance, which of course is what we're always looking for. When CEO evaluations are a high priority of the board and are organized well, the process instills confidence in the CEOs that their time and their efforts are appreciated by the board. Mutual respect and trust are developed. The relationships are strengthened and fostered. And all of this yields higher executive performance, which will also produce a reduction in CEO turnover and even higher job satisfaction, providing more continuity and effectiveness for your nonprofit. Given all these positive benefits that I've just rattled off, let's talk about what holds us back. What are the barriers that boards face? Over the years, both Corrine and I have heard CEOs say they rarely or never got evaluated, or if they did, it was an uncomfortable process because the person who was doing the evaluation was uncomfortable. For example, one person told me that the board member assigned to do the evaluation just stopped by her office, dropped the paperwork on her desk, and ran. Another board chair set up a meeting at a restaurant, and when she arrived, she told the CEO she could only stay 5 minutes. And another had drinks at a bar with the board chair, which is an interesting take on board CEO evaluation. Yeah, they had drinks at the bar. They spent 95% of the time chatting, and the evaluation was done as an afterthought in the parking lot. So unfortunately, while these examples may sound a little bizarre, they're not that unusual. The problem is that often nonprofits don't have a policy about CEO evaluation. They haven't thought the process through, and thus figuring it out feels like a complicated, difficult task. The board members don't know what to do or how to do it. So if your organization hasn't developed yet an evaluation policy or procedure, we really recommend that you do so. And that procedure or policy should include a description of when it will be done, who's going to do it, what is going to be the tool that will be used, and what, if any, information gathering needs to be done before the evaluation meeting itself. The CEO needs to be included in every step of the process of creating this policy. One of the fastest and easiest ways to ensure that the evaluation will be a positive experience is to include the CEO in designing the process and the tool that will be used. Next slide, Hugh. So successful boards review CEO goals and objectives on a routine basis throughout the year, often using, again, straightforward tools like the one that's on the Chester County Community Foundation website, which Corrine will talk about a little bit later. Many organizations provide an informal or mid-year evaluation to enhance the performance appraisal process, especially for CEOs early in their tenure, like say the first year or two of them working at an organization. And also touching base on goals and objectives throughout the year can help ensure that no surprises occur at the annual evaluation. When the board appropriately hires, guides, and supports the CEO, it sets the table for an effective evaluation process. And a key step in the process is the board policy on expectations of the CEO, making sure that's very clearly spelled out, and the performance appraisal that we just talked about. Next slide. So the policy provides a comprehensive roadmap for the evaluation process to ensure that the board and the CEO are on the same page regarding how the CEO is going to be evaluated. As I mentioned previously, developing that policy really needs to be a joint process between the board and the CEO. So you want to be sure that the evaluation reflects that year's strategic plan goals and objectives, as well as the job description. Because an annual evaluation is also a great opportunity to review the CEO job description and make any changes that may be needed as a result of shifts in direction, programming, staffing that may have occurred during the year. because this ensures then that the CEO job description is always pretty much up to date, which is a very, very crucially important thing to make sure. Comprehensive evaluation process will also include a review of the performance of the goals that the CEO and perhaps the board chair have established for the year. Some organizations ask the CEO to provide a draft set of goals that correspond to the strategic plan, and the goals are presented to the board either through a committee or to the full board directly. One challenge is that in most board CEO relationships, board members don't often have opportunities to directly observe the CEO in action, especially regarding interactions with staff that may report to the CEO. There are several strategies that can be used if it is important for the board to assess the CEO's performance when it comes to staff relationships or interactions with middle management. One approach is to do a staff survey, or what they call a 360-degree evaluation. However, like all parts of a CEO evaluation, this must be done well, or unintended consequences could be extremely problematic. Deciding who completes the survey is very important. Your typical participants in a survey might be the CEO's direct reports, staff leaders, or a random group of staff members, a sampling of the middle managers, depending on the size of the organization, and maybe some community leaders. And if your CEO has been collaborating or working with any consultants throughout the year, that group could be asked a few simple questions. I remember a few years ago, I got a call from a board chair because I'd been working rather intensely with the CEO in the organization for about a year. And he said, "We're doing her evaluation and we just want to know your perspective. How well is she doing?" So that's getting a very outside opinion on the effectiveness of the CEO. You can also do an annual employee satisfaction survey to gather insights into the organization's overall culture, or that could be done as a component of a strategic planning process. But you have to ensure that it's a confidential process to ensure that you're getting honest feedback, which may be very difficult in an organization that has a small staff. So again, this needs to be thought through really carefully. And it can be difficult sometimes to interpret the results fairly and accurately. So you really need to tread lightly when you're entering into that arena. Some high-performing boards use an evaluation tool that focuses on job responsibilities and asks each board member to complete it, and then to pass that in, and then the completed tool is compiled and the results reviewed with a board group and a committee. Another aspect that you can implement in CEO evaluation is a CEO self-evaluation. This provides an opportunity for the CEO to share major accomplishments of the year with the board, as well as their perspective on their own performance. It should include a summary of achievements relative to the goals and objectives, and a self-appraisal of the performance on the CEO's key accountabilities. So it could be, yes, one of the areas was we needed to expand the staff, or we needed to build a new program. And the CEO may say, yes, we did this program, it's working. I feel really good about that whole process. So that could be an example of what might be included in the CEO self-evaluation, which then gets factored in to the overall evaluation process. The self-evaluation also gives the CEO an opportunity to share with the board an accounting of all of their continuing education and leadership development activities that have been accomplished over the year. Some might include an updated resume and a bio even, which would provide the board with information regarding other professional related activities, such as service on local, state, or national boards, or volunteering for civic activities. And then the final step is to determine who's going to review the evaluation results with the CEO. And again, this should be a component of your evaluation policy. It could be the board chair by him or herself. It could be the executive committee. It could be a governance or nominating committee. I don't think we would recommend the full board, because that's pretty daunting to have the CEO there being evaluated and discussed by 15 people. But I think either an individual or a small group would be certainly appropriate. The goal of how you choose to do this is to make sure that the evaluation results are being shared in a mutually respectful, confidential meeting to ensure optimal communication and opportunities to ask questions and have meaningful, thoughtful discussion. Are there any questions at this point on this part? Anybody have? Just call out. Anybody have anything? Okay, we're good. Okay, so moving on, Corinne is now going to discuss best practices and specifics of what a CEO evaluation comprises.
I think one of the things that Connie said that is so important in this part of the presentation is that the evaluations can be a terrific tool for learning, sharing information, building a comfort level with the board and staff the board CEO and staff working together comfortably and supporting each other through the process. I'm going to talk about how we do a board and a CEO assessment, but remember that the last thing that Connie said about people working together in a mutually respectful environment is so important. Oftentimes, evaluations go right off the rails because the information that is being used to evaluate a person is based on one situation or one individual's perspective, and that's completely unfair. So, with that in mind, let me begin. A best practice, as you know, is a procedure or procedures that are proven to be most effective. In the following slides, we will identify the best practices to use and how to use them when assessing your CEO and nonprofit board. We will discuss the importance of including your nonprofit strategic plan and core values in the assessment process. And this is an important thing to remember because your organization is so the machinations of your organization are so improved and informed by what the strategic plan goals are for the organization year 1, year 2, and year 3. And if you've got a strategic plan that has a strong timeline, it gives you an opportunity to really see how the goals and objectives are being achieved and whether or not they're on time. So think of the strategic plan and the core values as being the bedrock of what you want to ask in your CEO and nonprofit board assessment. In order to keep the assessment fair, objective, open, and smart, we need to involve everyone in the process, and there needs to be clarity and agreement on the measurements, no surprises. So the team that's going to be involved in the evaluation needs to understand these rules from the very beginning, so that this evaluation goes smoothly, it's informative, it's helpful, and it's a team building exercise for all involved. SMART goals, the SMART goals I mentioned earlier. I think you all know this, but I'll say them anyway. SMART goals are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're realistic, and they're timely. And all of that information can be found in your strategic plan. Evaluation, as you know, is not exclusively tied to compensation. Sometimes budgets are down and the CEO works hardest and may not receive a raise for budget reasons. This is a fact of life in nonprofit organizations. Unlike many corporations, big corporations that reward CEOs for bad performance. The process includes feedback from the CEO, as Connie said earlier. There is a self-evaluation template on the next slide. In it, you will see that the self-evaluation reviews goals set previously in the strategic plan and reflects on the progress made toward those goals. As I said earlier, not on a single person or situation, which can skew performance reviews unfairly. the CEO and the board together discuss personal performance and growth plans. Next slide, please. Okay, what are we going to include in the CEO assessment? Well, essentially, we're looking at two different kinds of responsibilities. One are quantitative and the other is qualitative. The quantitative metrics that we want to use in a CEO performance would include performance, service, and organizational growth. And the kinds of questions that may be included might involve asking how many constituents were served during the past year. Did the program services grow or did they decrease? And by how much? Was there any new program development? And again, this refers back to what was included in the strategic planning goals. Because as you remember, the board hires the CEO and manages the CEO. The CEO manages the board and the strategic planning and the strategic plan process of achieving those goals with the board's help. Second quantitative measure is fiscal responsibility. And the questions might include, did we adhere to the budget and did we meet financial goals? That may also be included in the development plan. Budget income should look at dollars raised, donors retained, and new donors cultivated. This too should be part of both the strategic plan and the development plan. So everyone is really very clear about what they're trying to achieve, what their outright goal is. Qualitative metrics, some people would say, well, those are really hard to define and they're kind of soft and we're not really sure. But Connie and I would say there are ways to look at that. And what you might take a look at first is the leadership. Does the CEO inspire and support the board? Does the CEO inspire the staff and encourage the staff? Another big question would be, what is staff turnover? If you have an organization where a new CEO comes in and the staff turnover is huge in the first 6 months, that's a red flag to the board that something is not working. Rather than point fingers at the board, the CEO, or the staff, it's best to sit down and have a conversation and try to discern where the sticking points are so that you can move forward smoothly. Relationship building is key to an effective team achieving its goals. So you might want to ask the questions, does the CEO build relationship with constituents? Now, constituents could be donors. It could be people you would like to bring on board as a volunteer or as a board member. It could be other professionals in the field in which this nonprofit works. It could be people in the community who are movers and shakers who have the ability to help move the organization and build the organization. So you want a CEO who is very good at building relationships with those constituents. And the other question to raise is, does the CEO build trust with board and staff? That is so key. Connie and I have worked with organizations where the board does what the board does and the staff does what the staff does. And when we bring them together, they're not used to talking to each other. They're not used to, there isn't a comfort level there. In fact, there's a bit of the staff feels like they can't talk to the board. They don't know them, they can't talk to them. And that's not really the environment that you want to have in a productive nonprofit organization. When we were once working with a very large organization, Connie noticed that right away. And in the beginning of the strategic planning process, and I'm saying this because it's a tactic you may want to use at some point. Connie brought the board and the staff together and opened the strategic planning session with comments about this being a safe space, this being a space where people should feel comfortable to talk about what's on their mind and talk about what they've been thinking of that can bring important information to this process of strategic planning. Strategic planning is that place where the board and the staff can come together to learn about, figure out, and decide what's going to be best for that organization going forward. The other question you might raise is, does the CEO demonstrate problem-solving and decision-making skills? Those are really key skills. Oftentimes when things go awry, fingers get pointed and they're trying to find where who's responsible for the problem. And sometimes it's not a who, it's a what. So conversations between the CEO and the board and the staff can help bring out some of the aspects of those sticking points and create solutions to solving them and making the process go forward. I guess what I'm trying to say is the single biggest way to impact an organization is to focus on leadership development, both at the CEO, board, as well as the staff level. There is no limit to the potential of an organization that really works on developing leadership. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of a CEO assessment. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time walking through this. I think what you will see in this template is a really good starting point for a CEO assessment. And you can see, as you look at this, that a lot of the things that Connie and I talked about are in here. The inclusion of program development and delivery, of administrative and operations and fiscal management and so forth. And it also takes a look at the goals from the strategic plan and whether or not the CEO was able to satisfactorily or not so satisfactorily achieve some of those goals. Again, that needs to be a conversation about what achieving those goals looked like and what happened in the process. And there you can see on the bottom right-hand side, core values and key operating principles. Again, as I said, these are important things to consider in your assessment because they are organization building, they're individual building, and they're appropriate there. And you'd want to ask the CEO to talk about their main strengths and what they would like to see, increased attention focused on. You also should think about asking the CEO, what were your achievements and struggles this year? What lessons did you learn this year? How has the organization moved forward this past year? How are your relationships with the full board and the executive committee? Do you and the board balance your responsibilities with the board providing leadership and you providing the management of the organization? And as Connie mentioned earlier, this is something that happens so often in board meetings. And Connie, please feel free to jump in here if you have something you want to add. Oftentimes during a board meeting, instead of focusing on some of the board responsibilities, and as you all know, one of the big ones is fundraising, the board would like to sideline that conversation and focus in on managing the staff, on staff issues, on things that take them away from the focus, which is on board responsibilities, and into the domain of the CEO. It happens frequently. Is there anything you want to add to that, Con?
No, other than I'm so glad that you brought that up because that's often, I call it like a delaying tactic. And as Corinne said, it's usually, we do a lot of fundraising consulting related work, as you know, and, fundraising is often the dreaded responsibility of a board. And so, yeah, they'll end up sort of meddling around and getting into the areas, blurring the boundaries, and then it becomes very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a board once who spent they were trying to raise money on a kind of a rescue campaign. They needed money specifically for a project, and they needed to raise the money quickly. So the staff, the development staff, and the CEO came to the board with a plan. Well, the board looked at the plan and they kind of liked it, but they wanted it written up a different way. So the staff wrote it up in a different way and the CEO, approved it. And it went before the board again. And well, they needed another draft in a different form and they needed more information. Again, a delaying tactic, and it happens so often. You might ask, does the board support you? Because the CEO wants to, the board needs to know that whether or not they're supporting a CEO in the way that they should be. And if there is a problem with that, you ask, how can the board do better in supporting you in the year ahead? You might ask, is your compensation fair and reasonable? And then the final question that Connie and I often ask in feasibility studies and in capital campaigns is, what haven't we asked you that you would like us to know? And that's important because oftentimes we miss the things that might be very important to the person that we are either interviewing or reviewing. So think about that and think about adding that to your assessment. Next slide, please. Okay, not to beat a dead horse here. How does strategic planning relate to CEO and board assessment? We talked about that a whole lot, but it's think of your strategic plan as a roadmap of how you're going to get from point A to point B, how you're going to identify an issue that needs to be addressed and how you're going to solve it in what time frame. Within the strategic plan, those elements can be used to measure one's performance in an organization and its leadership. As such, the strategic plan includes goals, objectives, strategies, timelines, and budgets, all of the pieces that are needed to achieve organizational growth. And those are also the pieces that you may want to include in an assessment. And before those goals are established, the strategic plan also looks at external and internal realities to anticipate and respond to change and focus on achievable priorities that impact and advance the mission. Now I'm going to turn it over to Connie, who will talk about the reasons for conducting a board assessment. But before I do that, forgive me, I forgot to ask, are there any questions or comments that you would like to make? Okay, take it away.
All right. Hugh, next slide. Okay. So now we're going to move to the second half of our program, which is talking about board of directors self-assessment. And I'm going to cough.
That's sorry. Okay. That'll give me time to say boards really don't like self-assessment. They don't like learning about them. They don't like filling them out. They don't want to do them for the most part. So heads up on that.
Thank you. Thank you. So the same concepts that we talked about regarding CEO evaluation equally apply to board self-evaluations. Boards need to take time to step back, reflect thoughtfully on how they operate, and consider how effectively they're providing governance and oversight of your nonprofit. Often we get so busy and so focused on the work at hand that we neglect the importance of this annual or semi-annual self-assessment and the opportunities that it can provide. In order to function well, nonprofits need high-performing, committed boards who are dedicated to furthering the organization's mission. And a board self-evaluation is one essential tool that will help to make sure that that occurs. A board self-assessment can provide important information regarding a number of issues about the functioning of the board, such as how engaged and informed the members are regarding the nonprofit's work, how well they understand their roles and responsibilities. The evaluation can identify training needs or changes that may be needed in how the board operates. It can also highlight any problems that may exist with the board culture, such as a lack of mutual respect and tolerance, productive conversations, or problematic behaviors, such as people arriving late or using their cell phones, or texting during meetings when there's an important topic being discussed, or any other issues that people may be reluctant to bring up. What holds boards back from doing these self-evaluations? Basically, it's the same issue as with the CEO evaluation. Often not, it's the same kind of thing. Nonprofits don't have a policy about it. They haven't developed a practice about every year we do this or every other year we do this. They haven't thought the process through, and thus figuring it out feels like a complicated, difficult task. And again, in this situation, board members don't know what to do or how to do it. So again, as with the CEO evaluation, developing an effective policy will help to ensure that the self-evaluation becomes a useful, engaging, periodic process that sparks new growth and develops helpful solutions to problems. And as with the CEO evaluations, happily, the Chester County Community Foundation has offered a sample board self-evaluation survey on their website to make your job even easier. And also, Corrine and I have samples of other board self-evaluation tools. If any of you would like to let us know, we're happy to send them to you as well. Generally, it's the responsibility of the governance committee, or you may have a nominating committee, to develop or select an evaluation tool to ensure that the evaluation happens either annually again or every other year, to compile those results and then to make sure they get reviewed with the board. Lacking a governance committee or a nominating committee, this could be done by the executive committee or even a small ad hoc committee of maybe a couple board members that you might appoint just for that process if it's a very small board. And the most crucial step in board assessment is being willing to review and thoughtfully discuss the results. The assessment is going to be of little or no value if that step isn't done. So now Corrine's going to talk about some of the specific items that are generally included in a board self-assessment.
Okay. The board self-assessments are usually done by the nominating/governance committee. But as Connie said, sometimes it can be the executive committee if you don't have a nominating or a governing committee. The board self-assessment includes two different pieces. One is the individual members of the individual board member themselves. The reason that we want to know individual board members' feelings about certain things is it helps us determine whether or not that board member needs help, and if so, in what places. You know, remember, board members have full-time jobs, and sometimes they come to meetings less than prepared. That's okay. But if you have a board member who cannot talk convincingly and openly about the programs that your organization offers, or the amount of money that needs to be raised, or the quick elevator speech. It's important for you to know that as a CEO or as a staff member, so that you can provide that board member with the kind of information they need so that they can answer those questions. So let's go back to individual board member responsibilities. There are people working on my building outside my window right now. I'm sorry, that's why I turned away. It sounded like someone was breaking in, and I live in the city, so that's a possibility always, you know. The individual board member responsibilities focus on the level of the board members' engagement. And you'll see in the next slide, that's one of the things that's included on the evaluation. You might want to ask, is the individual board member a good steward of the organization's finances and mission? Can they talk about that? Can they talk about the importance of the mission and the importance of finances to support that mission in a compelling way? Does the individual commit to training, education, and mentorship of other board members? It's really important. Board members should work peer-to-peer. So helping a new board member learn the ropes, become comfortable with the language, feel comfortable understanding the mission and being able to relay that in a way that is accessible and meaningful to another person. It's really important. So you want to have that kind of relationship among your board members. And most important, does the individual board member make a personal contribution that is meaningful for them? And the reason that's important is because think of your board and your CEO and the staff as well. You're like the family. You're like the family of this nonprofit organization. And an outsider will look at the board members and think, as a family member, if they're not supporting the organization, why should I? Because I'm not a family member. So making a contribution, supporting the organization is a really important thing that a board member does, because they can't really go out and encourage other people to support the organization unless they support it themselves. It's not unusual for a potential donor to say to a board member who's soliciting them, well, have you supported the organization? How long have you supported it? And if they say no, it kind of puts a real damper on the solicitation. And you also want a board member who is able to help raise funds from others to support the mission. This is vital because board members are uniquely positioned, as I said earlier. They're peer-to-peer with respective donors. And if they're not supporting the organization, other donors are not going to do it too. Now let's switch over to the full board member responsibilities. Excuse me, before I do that, let me back up. Are there any questions on individual board member responsibilities? Okay. Full board member responsibilities include, has your board effectively participated in meetings and work groups to advance the mission? An example of this is Connie and I do a lot of strategic planning with nonprofit organizations. And we've worked with boards that have, large numbers and small numbers. And when it comes to strategic planning, you want at least 80% or more of the board there, because the decisions that are being made require everyone's involvement, engagement, wisdom, and support in making those decisions. So you need board members who show up for meetings. Has your board created a diverse and effective board? It's kind of hard to raise money for a particular organization if your board member is not diverse. And this is particularly true of foundation grants. Oftentimes, foundations will want to know about the level of your board diversity. Another responsibility includes, has your board participated in strategic planning, oversight of financial matters, and fundraising? They've got to be. It's just absolutely crucial. They need to drive it. It's important to remember that the board leads by example. Donors look at board leadership as one of the indices when he or she decides to invest in the organization. Donors invest wisely in organizations that have a strong board, are mission-driven, and demonstrate impact on the life or the community as your mission is. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the board self-assessment. Here's a template that you can use. And I think this is a pretty good template. But again, as Connie said, if you wish, you can contact CCF, Chester County Community Foundation, and they will help prepare a board self-assessment for you, because they believe that board self-assessments are really important tools for a nonprofit organization. And you'll see in this board self-assessment that we're asking board members to tell us if they can explain the mission and the core values, if they have adequate opportunities to meet with fellow board members. Do they have an understanding of what governance issues come before the board and what governance issues come before the CEO and the staff? Moving over to the next slide, number 2, again, you will see asking board members, how well do you understand the topic? Strategic planning, finances and investments, core programs of most nonprofits. Do they feel they're effective, et cetera, on and on. And then at the very bottom on the right, you'll see the question, how can you, as an individual board member, better support our executive director, CEO? It's a really important question to ask. You also see what could be done to help make your board service more interesting and rewarding. This is very important because there may be something about the way in which a board member takes in information or responds to a process that they need to have before they can respond. So that question would really eke out what kind of tactics you might want to use when you work with a board member to help them learn and become more involved and engaged. Board self-assessment surveys also allow you to identify or not identify yourself. That would be up to you. It's more helpful if they do identify themselves, because then you know where, you know what steps that need to be taken and who needs what from you. Okay, next slide, please. Assessment areas should be designed based on job description for CEO and board members and strategic plan. I'm just summarizing now what we've talked about. An assessment needs to be completed by enough respondents so that the results are meaningful. It is very hard to get 100% participation from the board. 80% is acceptable. I always try to push for more. More information is more helpful and more productive. Assessment feedback should summarize the responses to the questions and highlight key areas of strength, key areas for development, refinement, and focus. When you go back to the board to give them a summary of their of the assessment, you want to hit the highlights and not get lost in the weeds, because it's a lot of information to take in. So what we're suggesting here is that you really focus on important areas like development, refinement, focus, strength, those kinds of things. Well-orchestrated assessments foster incremental organizational growth and development year after year. You'll learn from the first time you do an assessment, you'll learn things that you will carry over to the next year and the year following that. So don't be discouraged if your first year you feel like there's more there's more tooling to be done to make it more effective. You have another year to do a better job and take this opportunity to learn from it. That's all I have. Anything you want to talk about? I think we have 11 minutes.
Yeah, I would just like to add that another element of assessment that you can add for the board of directors, in addition to an annual or say semi-annual assessment, would be an individual meeting evaluation, which would be a brief, maybe 1.5 page evaluation that you would do of a specific meeting. And the meeting evaluation would include questions like, was this meeting a good use of my time? Did I feel comfortable asking questions? Was the discussion worthwhile? Did we come to worthwhile conclusions? Did I feel comfortable asking what someone might think would be a stupid question? Which is a different ways of measuring what's the culture like, how responsive and how supportive is the board, and how interested are they in diverse opinions about things. So you could ask a question, was the meeting too long? Was it too short? Is the timing good? And if you did that, say maybe once, or if your board is having difficult times, you might even do it twice during a year, unless you only meet 4 times a year, and then probably 1 time would be enough. But that can be serve as sort of an interim board self-assessment, as we were talking about with the CEO. Sometimes it's helpful throughout the year or periodically during the year to sit with the CEO and say, how are things going? This is what we're seeing. What are you seeing? Da, da, da. Same thing to do with the board, so that you sort of are building, if you haven't already, you're gradually sort of building this learning culture in the board. and the expectation and acceptance that periodically we're going to take a few minutes out and sit back and reflect on what we're doing. Is there anybody who does that, either board meeting evaluations or does board self-assessments, that you'd like to share anything about your experiences?
So Connie, I actually had a question. Chris
Great.
Ecker from the Crime Victim Center. So I was looking forward to this presentation because we had a board retreat and our self-assessment was one of those things that was on the agenda that we never got to. And so we had a separate retreat and said, okay, all that stuff that keeps getting pushed to old business, old business, old business, we're going to do it. And so we started doing it. So my question is, the assessment is broken down into like individual, how am I doing as a board member? And then how are we doing as a board?
Mhm.
And as I'm getting these back, I'm wondering what the best way is to process this feedback. As
Mhm.
far as like, do I just kind of look at the individual? What I've been doing thus far is looking at the individual ones and seeing what can be improved. For instance, a couple of them are asking for more training. Okay, good. I can put that on my to-do list and get more training. A couple of them asked for the board materials more in advance than we're doing now. Okay, I can process that and do that too.
Right.
But with the individual feedback versus the overall board feedback, I'm kind of struggling with what's the best way to present that to the board. Like, do I present the individual ones to the board? Like, I'm just not sure.
Okay. I'll jump in, and then Corrine, you jump in with any thoughts. Do you also have like a governance committee or a nominating committee working on this with you?
No, so we have an executive committee because we're only
Uh-huh.
13-member board. So our executive
Uh-huh.
committee is our governance committee. And no, I basically just started sending out the self-assessment saying, fill this out and get it back to me.
Right.
Then we were going to figure out what to do with it. So I have not
Right,
involved
right.
it until I get them all back. I wasn't going to get involved the executive
Right.
committee.
Right. Yeah. So I think certainly that would be a question you'd want to ask them, like what would they want to see? But I would suggest, if there's training needs identified, for example, maybe you've got 3 people who want finance and 2 people want mission and 3 people want, whatever, something else, PR or programmatic help. You might just say these were the training needs identified and just list them. As a way of letting them know what people are seeing. These are some suggestions that members have made about ways to improve the board functioning, certainly without putting people's names, but just sort of listing that. And you might, since you have a small board, saying like 40% or 60%. I mean, that may not be necessary because we're talking about 2 or 3 people. So you might just give maybe everything equal weight unless something really seems like an outlier, which sometimes can happen too. Corrine, what do you think? What would you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if time is constrained, I would just present what the entire board, what the whole board piece of the assessment plan with the whole board. And then the individual ones, I would, if they were problem areas, I would go to the individuals and have a one-on-one with them. I kind of make a hybrid. Just, your board. So I know how to make that decision. I would make it in terms of what's going to be the best way to present this information so that they can hear it and take it and use it. And you would know that.
I think too, what I find sometimes when, and I think we've all experienced this, when one person asks a question, usually there are 4 or 5 other people who have the same question, but they just don't have the courage or the awareness to ask it.
Yeah.
So, regarding the training needs, I think I would say, fine, we need to address these 6 areas with our board over the next year, and you make the training available to everyone. And if people don't want to come, that's fine. Or you figure out a user-friendly way of doing it. Maybe it's 10 minutes in a board meeting if it's something that could be covered in 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe you figure out that kind of an approach for it too.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And
People
that's
aren't
what I was
born-
thinking too. I was thinking like the individual piece, I was just kind of scanning those to see if there's anything that I'm like, wait, you rated yourself how on that one? on, like kind of question marks of proverbially above the head. And then I was thinking of doing like an average and saying, okay, of the board assessment, this is what you guys gave yourselves. And then just
Yeah.
kind of identifying areas that we might need to improve upon.
That's a good
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Remember, your board members weren't born knowing how to be board members. They weren't born knowing your organization. So our job from the beginning, and this is sort of off topic, but very important to the topic, when you interview prospective board members, take a look at the things that we talked about today, because those are the kinds of things that you want in your board members. Those are the kinds of, you want a board member who's going to feel engaged. You want a board member who's going to know, have excitement about the mission and want to talk about that. Look for those kinds of things in your board members as well. And it could be part of your board job description, some of the things that we've talked about today.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point, Corinne, too, that I meant to mention earlier, is that it's sort of like parenting. We often assume, well, you're just going to figure out how to be a board member, right?
Spoiler alert, Connie and I are not parents, by the way.
but it's sort of, and every board operates differently. Big boards are, big boards that are high level functioning, just policy boards, have different responsibilities from Chris, your 13-member more grassroots board. And so these kinds of evaluation processes can just be really helpful with helping board members to sort of settle into, oh, this is the job, this is what I need to do. And just sort of to make it also, I think it's so important to make it comfortable for people to say, no question is stupid, please speak up. When I do workshops with boards about how to interpret financial documents, 990s, expense reports, things like that, because finance is so important, I'm always saying, no matter how stupid you think your question is, ask it. Do not be afraid to say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not a CPA, but what's this number? And so I think that goes across the board with all the different topics. And I think, Hugh, are we at the end of our time? Are we there?
Pretty close. We have 2 minutes.
We have
Okay.
2 minutes. Yeah. we
All
have 2
right.
minutes.
Does anybody else have another question or a comment or anything?
Just want to say thank you. It was very helpful, very informative.
Oh, wait,
Good.
This is
Connie
this
has a
is
question.
Beth Lockhart.
Yes.
Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint?
Yes, a PowerPoint will be available. We're going to send it out after today's session. We recorded today's session, so we'll have a recording, and the PowerPoint presentation will be on the Chester County Community Foundation website. But I will be sending out an email that'll have a link to the presentation.
And again, just encourage you to go to the
Thank you.
link that will be on the PowerPoint and that you saw briefly today for either of those assessment tools. Go to the Community Foundation's website so that you can look at those tools and see if that might be something that would be useful for you. And as Corinne noted, I do believe the staff are able to help you customize those forms for you if you want to add, or you want some guidance or just some tech help. They have some really wonderful technically savvy people there, kids, of course, but who can handle this stuff. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
We're just thrilled that you're
Thank you.
interested in this topic. Thrilled that you're interested and that you wanted to learn about it, and please go on out and continue doing your assessments.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Very
Thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.